are no wrong questions. So yeah, just feel free to ask whatever that's on your mind. So before we start, so I'd just like to throw you guys a question, right? So is there a difference between mental health versus mental illness? So think about it as physical health versus physical illness. So a lot of times I hear people say that, oh, that person has some mental health issue, or they do layman diagnosis just based off maybe one presentation of a symptom. Say, for example, a colleague of mine came into work looking really down for the day. So it could be that he's stressed out with work, or maybe there's some stress going on at home. But I then would hear maybe some people saying that, oh, he looks really depressed today. Is he depressed? So I think we have to learn to steer away from layman diagnosis and really understand what's the difference between, or what was the definition of mental health versus mental illness. So think of it as a continuum. As with physical health, we have different states of physical health. So sometimes we are at our best state when we're healthy, but sometimes when we're down with cold or flu, or we're not well for the day, then maybe we're not in the best state. And then physical illness would mean that we might have certain chronic physical conditions. So mental health is exactly the same. So there are days that maybe we are not at our best in terms of our mental health state. So maybe we might shift a little bit to the right of the continuum. But for us to deem someone as having a mental health disorder or mental illness, it requires a clinical diagnosis, meaning to go through not just one symptom, but a category of symptoms. And also we diagnose by criteria. So we have to go through that to be able to deem someone as having mental health illness or disorder. So today itself, I'll run through with you what are some of the differences between stress, burnout, depression, and anxiety. Okay, so let's look at the experience of stress first. So the thing is, all of us here would have experienced stress before, even like for myself as a mental health professional. So what is stress? So stress is actually a response to any form of stresses, and all of us have different stresses in our lives, right? So it depends on what kind of roles we juggle, or what kind of experiences that we've been through. So you can look at stress, symptoms of stress based on these 4 categories. So the first one would be physical symptoms, whereby you might experience these symptoms that's listed here, or even more. And also the one on the right that you see, these are cognitive symptoms, meaning symptoms that's affecting your thinking or your thought processes. And then the one at the bottom left, it would be emotional symptoms, whereby maybe in moments or in bouts of stress, you might have experienced, very low mood, irritability, anger, or you might feel sad. But remember that if it's stress, then it might be a temporary experience in response to the stressor. And then on the lower right, it would be behavioral symptoms. So for example, you might respond in ways that indicates that you are stressed. So I've heard of a lot of people talking about emotional eating. When they're stressed, they tend to eat more, or they tend to drink more, smoke more, or even maybe respond to or act in ways that might not be very ideal in according to how they feel. So these are symptoms of stress. So then the next question would be, then what's the difference between stress and burnout? So burnout is actually, so remember the continuum earlier. So burnout is actually an experience of chronic stress. So you might move a little bit more to the right side of the scale. So burnout might have symptoms that overlap with stress, but maybe in a more prolonged phase. So typically when I hear clients mention that they feel really burnout, so one thing I would notice is that other than exhaustion, extreme exhaustion or lethargy, they would typically mention about having some form of escape fantasy. So what it means is that imagine that you're burnout at school with studies or at work. You might tend to start having thoughts like, like maybe this work is just not really suitable for me. I think about quitting work, or let me just quit studies and not do anything. So that's what I meant by escape fantasies. And I also hear a lot of people maybe feeling very numb, like there's this experience of numbness when you feel very burnout. Maybe due to prolonged chronic stress, they might express that they can't really feel anything anymore. They just want to rest. So a lot of times you might see rest as a way of recovering from burnout. But other than physical rest, it's also important to look at how you can create more mental rest as well. So what's the difference now between burnout versus anxiety and depression? Then I'll also show you guys. So remember that stress and burnout, maybe you might be able to spot it first by the physical symptoms that you're experiencing. And then from there, then if you're more aware, you might notice what are some of the cognitive symptoms or emotional symptoms that you might be able to identify. Then that might tell you that you're either stressed or burnout. So depression would be towards the right side of the scale. So it's a mental health disorder. But the experience of depression itself, we don't just diagnose based on like a one-off symptom. We look at a category of symptoms and also based off certain criteria. So we actually have a handbook called the DSM-5 that we would refer to, that either psychologists or psychiatrists would look to be able to diagnose a person as having clinical depression. So you might see that the symptoms listed here are similar to, or might overlap with stress or burnout, but one of the identifying criteria, it would be that it impacts all areas of functioning, and all these symptoms have to be 2 weeks, have to last around 2 weeks or even more. So you might have a combination of symptoms like low mood. These are the common ones, like low mood, loss of interest in what you used to enjoy before. A lot of cognitive symptoms as well, like feelings of worthlessness. You might feel really shameful. You might feel guilty. You might feel like you want to withdraw. And also a lot of feelings of lethargy, not being able to get out of bed. So later on, I'll also share the lived experience of someone with depression, because we might have days that we also feel like that, right? But remember that for clinical depression, it's a combination of these symptoms. So weight loss or weight gain is common as well, or it's either the person would sleep much less or sleep much more. Difficulties concentrating. And lastly, at a more severe level, then there might be recurrent thoughts of death, suicide, or even the act of attempted suicide. So it impacts all areas of functioning, which includes, if you're a student, studies, academics. If you're working, then it would impact your work functioning, and then also your social functioning and your personal life. Personal life might include it would include self-care as well, meaning how you groom yourself, getting out of the bed, being able to take care of yourself by making meals. Individuals who are depressed would have a lot of difficulties doing so. So they would struggle in terms of activities of daily living. And moving on to anxiety. So anxiety itself, so later on, I'll also show you the difference between depression and anxiety. So remember that anxiety is an emotion, right? So it's also a mood that we might experience from time to time, depending on what provokes us. But I would say that for clinical anxiety, again, it goes back to it being very consuming, and it impacts all areas of functioning in life as well. So it's not just appropriate to the situation. So for example, maybe like today I'm giving a talk, or I feel nervous, I feel a little bit anxious. But clinical anxiety would be that even after the event itself, the experience of anxiety might prolong. So it might sustain for days and days, and it's very consuming, meaning that it might be all that you worry about, all that you think about throughout the day as well. So aside from the experience of nervousness, restlessness, or feeling very tense, there's also this sense of something is really wrong or something will go wrong. So it's what we call catastrophization. So there's this pattern of thinking of the worst case scenario in cases of clinical anxiety. And then there's also accompanying physical symptoms like increased heart rate, sweating when you feel really anxious. You might feel really lethargic, trembling, or even might feel like stomach discomfort. So for example, when I used to tutor, there's a student that would feel really anxious before an exam or before an assessment. So he would have to go to the toilet every time before he sits for that assessment itself. And there's also increased sweating, and there are also other physical symptoms that one might experience. So I'm just drawing out those main ones. So clinical anxiety, there's actually different types of anxiety disorders. So that's panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder. But if you find yourself, or if you know someone else struggling with anxiety that is really consuming, what you have to do would be just to refer to a professional. Then they would be able to help you differentiate what type of anxiety is it. So a lot of times I also hear people being confused between anxiety versus depression, because sometimes when a person has clinical depression, they might also have like bouts of anxiety, or when an individual has clinical anxiety, they might also have bouts of depression. So it goes back to which type of symptoms dominate more, then the diagnosis would be based on that. But there might also be comorbidity, meaning that someone might have clinical depression and anxiety at the same time. So there are also overlaps for depression and anxiety. So like you can look at the picture here. So what's overlapping might be difficulty sleeping. Why? Because for any individual with depression or anxiety, there's a lot of worries that go through their mind. So typically, I would hear clients describing that they have sleep difficulties, either difficulties falling asleep, or they can fall asleep, but they will sleep and wake in between. And there's difficulties concentrating as well. They feel really agitated. And also there's what we call psychosomatic symptoms, meaning that it might not be symptoms based on any medical condition, but it's based on stress or any from a psychological basis that these symptoms will come about. Like the ones that I've mentioned earlier, such as muscle tension, chest tightness, difficulties breathing, headaches. So these are all psychosomatic symptoms that are unexplainable, and that has no medical basis or medical diagnosis. Okay, so I'll zoom in to focus on depression, the experience of depression and anxiety. So I hear a lot of people asking this question. So how does it feel like to be really depressed? So this description is just from one client of mine, and there are actually many different people experience, the feeling of depression or clinical depression differently. So try to place one hand around your forehead lightly. So that's what she described to me, and then squeeze really hard until you feel uncomfortable. So she mentioned that this is the feeling that she gets every morning when she wakes up, when she gets out of bed, and when she has to go through the day. This is how she feels. So she mentioned that being depressed felt like having a sense of pressure or heaviness in my head, like a fog. So I can't think really well. I can't focus on conversations. I can't focus on my studies. And then when I sleep, I can't sleep really well. And I wake up the next day feeling like that again. So imagine this experience prolonged for 2 weeks, every single day for 2 weeks or even more. So this is clinical depression. And there are really so many different ways that patients or clients with depression would describe their experience. So this is just one of them. And this is a short excerpt or description. So I woke up at 11:30 and fell back to sleep until 2 o'clock. So the night before, I lay in bed watching something on Netflix. I can't remember now. So I barely have any energy to get out of bed, let alone to do anything productive. So today, I managed to make myself some breakfast, and it was an achievement. I dread going to work on Monday. It means that I have to pick up the work that I've procrastinated on and interact with colleagues as well. Everything is hopeless, and I feel hopeless and that life has nothing to offer. So if you look at this description of this person's experience, you can see that life is very overwhelming for this person. So even maybe things that we take for granted, like simple activities like waking up, making a cup of coffee, breakfast, making the bed, brushing teeth, can be really difficult for an individual with clinical depression. And it's not just that, it's also their thought processes, that everything seems really overwhelming. They might feel worthless, they might feel that they can't do things, they might feel hopeless or helpless as well. So depression to the person, to the person that's experiencing it, might look like this. So there's no pleasure or joy in life, difficulties concentrating, hopelessness, low self-esteem, low energy levels, lethargy. So these symptoms might be the ones that I've shown in the pictures earlier, but it's just like a review or a recap. So food might not seem very appetizing, or if a person eats, a lot more than the usual, then it's used as a source of comfort. So it's not just eating because the food is good, but they're just eating because it fills a certain void within them. And then there's body aches, lack of motivation to do anything, like the person earlier that described her day, loss of interest in social activities. So you might observe the person withdrawing. So a lot of times, social withdrawal is a very key red flag of a person suffering from depression. And then there's this sense of hopelessness. But a lot of times, even though we might know this like theoretically, right, we might read about this, but from the outside, I think it's hard to really identify if you're not sensitive or intentional enough. So depression to the outside world, it might look like this. Malingering, meaning that some people, they might say, oh, this person, maybe they're just, maybe they're okay, like they seem okay on the outside, life seems pretty good, maybe they're just lazy, or maybe they just don't want to do the work that I've assigned to them, or maybe they're faking it. So I've heard descriptions like that before. Or they're not trying hard enough. It's a very simple task, why can't you do it? Forgetfulness, or even sometimes described as not really paying attention, you're not really focusing, or antisocial because of the social withdrawal. So it's very real. And I've heard even family members describing, using these descriptives to a client with depression before, with depression also in the past. So a lot of times when we look at, a person, on the outside, there's actually a lot going on the inside that we might not know about. So be very careful and also be very sensitive. So if you inquire more, if you connect more, then maybe you would see like a different side of that person's experience. Okay, so moving on to anxiety. How is it like experiencing anxiety? So this is a description from another client. So try to do that. Try to do this. Place a hand around your chest lightly, so really lightly, and then after that you press hard until uncomfortable. So imagine this sensation, and it's prolonged, and it's throughout the day, and it's throughout maybe the month as well. So this client described having anxiety, like having a gripping tightness in her chest, and also a feeling of impending doom. So this feeling of impending doom is as if, imagine that something, bad is going to happen and you know about it. So for anxiety, maybe there's really, in reality, there's nothing really bad that's going to happen, but they tend to have this fear that is going to, that there's going to be something bad. They tend to anticipate it. So this is the feeling that a client with clinical anxiety would have, and is sustained and prolonged. So it's very disturbing. So from this client, she describes having anxiety as such. My mind makes me analyze everything about a situation and think the worst. It makes me question all the good things and get overwhelmed by the bad. So it's so much more than being sensitive. It's reacting to any situation, whether it's big or small, and not knowing what the rational thing to do is. It's feeling overwhelmed by physical symptoms, tightness in my chest, difficulties catching my breath. I just find it so hard to control my thoughts, and my mind is always somewhere else. So, anxiety has this component of physical symptoms, as well as this a very trademark, maybe layman we say, oh, worry, overthinking, but it's this trademark of a pattern of rumination. So the mind just goes to different, really different scenarios to analyze a lot of possibilities and the worst possible situation. So that's the experience of clinical anxiety, and it's very distressing as well. And I hear a lot of times, friends or family would say, oh, that person really thinks too much. She's just overthinking. You just need to stop overthinking. So it really doesn't work that way. It's really easy to make that suggestion, but the work that goes into it is, I would say, it's really a lot. So if you look into a lived experience of a person with anxiety, then you realize that this person is really struggling a lot, and it's like from a moment to moment basis. So anxiety to the person that has it might feel like this. So physical symptoms, feelings of restlessness, uneasiness, or sometimes when there's a stressful situation, maybe they would experience some panic attacks, palpitations, stomach discomfort. They might feel uncomfortable, nausea, sweating or hot flushes, among others. And also experientially, in terms of how they feel and how they think, they would fear of the worst thing happening, and there's a sense of dread there, and that something isn't quite right. So it's sort of like they're on high alert mode all the time, and they find it very difficult to relax, very frequent worries, and there's a constant need for reassurance. So a lot of checking behaviors, a lot of maybe reassurance seeking from other people, but they tend to do that very often, because if the reassurance is coming from an external party, it might soothe them or relax them for a bit. But if the mind continues to work in this way, to engage in this pattern of rumination, then it's very difficult to calm themselves down. All right. So anxiety to the outside world, what it looks like I've mentioned earlier, or she's overthinking, or she's just a scaredy cat. She's scared, she's scared of everything. Or sometimes because of anxiety, a person might also withdraw. So it might not present as overthinking, but a person can also be aloof because they're scared or they're anxious, so they avoid certain situations, or they might appear to be very reserved. So it takes time to really understand whether it's anxiety or whether it's depression or whether it's something else. So yeah, these are just some of the common descriptions that I've heard, again, family or friends mentioning about a client with anxiety. Okay, so going to the topic of how to cope. So there are actually a lot of different coping skills, but like for today, because the talk is short, so I just concised it to 3 different categories. So think about it from a problem focus, emotion focus, and also appraisal focus point of view. So I explain to you what each of it means. So for problem focus, it means that to cope, you focus on the problem itself. It doesn't mean that you ruminate on the problem, but you focus on really practical ways and solutions in response to problems. Because a lot of times, like with my clients with experience of depression and anxiety, what we realize is that they tend to focus on the problems. They tend to focus on every single aspect, but not quite practical ways or solutions. So sometimes when you zoom out from the problem itself, when you look at it from like a bird's eye perspective, then you might see, hey, there are different angles to actually work through a certain problem. So they're actually very solid solutions to it. But of course, problem focused coping might not work for all cases. So problem focus might work if, let's say, for example, if you're really stressed out at work, right? So the work is really demanding, or the work environment is really toxic, and you have tried your best to kind of cope through different ways. So maybe a solution can be to consider changing of companies, or to consider maybe a transfer of departments. So this is more practical and more solution focused. So the first step, you can try problem solving or problem focused ways. Then the second one would be emotion focused. So sometimes we might not be able to really solve every single problems that we face in life, right? And sometimes what we might experience as problems might actually come from the way that we perceive things, or the way that we experience our emotions. So in stressful situations, you can focus on emotional coping strategies. For example, first, to focus on increasing awareness of your own emotions, to actually understand what you are feeling and why you're feeling it, and then to learn how to regulate difficult emotions. Because a lot of times what I noticed would be that a lot of people would tend to be very confused in terms of how they feel, what they are feeling, and why they feel this way. And then they would tend to cope by perhaps not very healthy strategies. So it's very important to increase your emotional awareness. So know how you're feeling. So like like typically we would ask that question, oh, how are you? So you can also ask yourself that question, how am I today? How am I feeling as of this moment, if not today? So try to practice that, so you're more sensitive to how you feel. And in terms of regulating difficult emotions, what it means is that imagine like a very rough sea, right? So maybe that's our internal experience when we have a lot of emotional distress. So what we want to do is that we want to calm the sea. So what it means is, what I mean is to regulate your emotions by maybe going through different healthy channels, such as disclosure, meaning to express how you feel. It might not be in therapy. It can also just be, with a friend, with a trusted person, with family, to really verbally express and talk about how you feel. Distraction or attention shifting. So sometimes when we experience a certain emotion really intensely, we don't want to focus on that emotion too much, because then it will reinforce it. So what we want to do is to acknowledge it, to be aware, but then you shift your attention to doing something else. So from there, you might calm that emotional distress, and then you'll be better able to kind of work through understanding, oh, why did I feel that way earlier? How can I look at things from a different way to help me not feel this way, or to help me regulate how I feel? And then there are other ways, such as relaxation techniques. I think if you go online and you search, right, there's so many relaxation techniques that you can find. Engaging in activities that you enjoy, meaningful activities, mindfulness, or even prayers, meditative exercises. So these work for you to regulate difficult emotions. And then lastly, appraisal focus. So appraisal meaning, it means how we assume things, how we look at things, or our perspective in life, basically, or our perspective of certain situation. So an appraisal focused coping strategy would mean that you can try to look at the situation from different angles, to reframe the way that you think, or also to practice an attitude of gratitude. So there's a lot of research that has been done that if you are grateful for your experiences, like towards the end of the day, you think about a few things that you're grateful for, it actually cultivates a more optimistic mindset. And there's also self-compassion, because I think nowadays I hear a lot of clients beating themselves up, and a lot of times we might be very critical of ourselves. So practicing self-love, self-compassion works, because it's not just self-love, it's also a shift of perspective in terms of how we see ourselves and how we see the situation as well. Yeah. There are actually many different ways, but I'll just cover them like briefly today. Okay, so lastly, how do we reach out? One thing is that depression, right? In depression and anxiety, a lot of times people withdraw because they might not know, they might feel shameful, they might feel guilty, they might not know what to say, or they might feel really overwhelmed or anxious. So I saw this quote that says that depression doesn't diminish a person's desire to connect with other people, just their ability. So what I would say is that do not be afraid to start conversations, and do not be afraid to be a little bit more persistent, because sometimes they might, people might pull away because they might feel fearful, they might feel anxious, or they might be afraid that you might judge. So reach out again, but of course in ways that are tactful. So first of all would be to ask, how have you been? How are you doing? How's your day? So you don't even have to go really in depth in your conversation. It would just be like conversation starters, would just be to create like meaningful conversations on a day-to-day basis. And then of course to show empathy. Before you offer help, I think it's important to let the other person know that you understand how they are feeling. You might not understand exactly their experiences, but you understand their emotions, and you understand that they're in this state and you can accept it, and you are compassionate towards them. So to show empathy, and empathy would look like, oh, I might not understand exactly your experience, but I can see that you are you're not in a good state, or I can see that you're really down these days. So sometimes when you are able to empathize, it will open doors to other conversations as well. To be able to show care and concern for the other person. Very simple stuff. And later on to offer hope, that, I have, maybe you've heard of someone that has, gone through the journey of recovery. So that would be maybe it would be to share the story, to offer hope to the other person. And lastly, to offer help. So when you offer help, what I would say is that you have to be specific when you offer help. So it's not just, oh, I know this place and you can just call them up. So offer help means that you get the contact or any information and intentionally send it to them. So it's not intrusive in any way. It's not that, you would call up and make an appointment for the person. It's more of just offering them very specific information so they know where to go to. Yeah, or offering help can also be that, hey, I'm free between this time and this time. You can just let's connect during that time itself. So I hear a lot of people saying that, oh, I'm free, you can just call me anytime. But if it's too general, the other person on the other end might not have an idea, or they might be very hesitant. So yeah, just be specific when you offer help to the other person. And lastly, these are just some things to be aware of. So when you're helping a family or a friend who might be experiencing anxiety or even depression, remember that your role would be as a supporter. So a lot of times I also hear caregivers falling into the same state as well. So they feel equally helpless or equally hopeless because they take on full responsibility for the person whom is depressed. So just remember that you don't have to do that. It's just as a role to support, to walk with the person, so that you're not in the quicksand with the person. And be very clear in terms of your limitations, what you can do and what you cannot do. So it's okay if you can offer support to a certain level, because you can't be you can't offer everything, and you can't do everything as well. And most importantly would be also to engage different resources, so that the person that you're supporting have different resources that they can go to. So it wouldn't be just you as a sole support person. And always keep communication channels open, converse and to reach out. And lastly, a lot of times I also hear people getting very overwhelmed when they're supporting someone with anxiety or depression. So just ask for help, reach out and ask for help or recommendations from professionals, or even anyone that you think would also be able to support you as you support that person. Yeah, so I think that's basically all. I hope that I didn't rush through the whole talk, just taking the time limit into consideration. Yeah, so from here we'll move on to the Q&A.